Well, Angelo, I'm so excited that you're in the studio with me today because we're going to be discussing something that I talk about, but you're going to talk about it from another angle. People often hear me talking about how when we make decisions, our genes express, and that makes amino acids, and amino acids make proteins, and those build thoughts. But not only is your mind doing that amazing thing, we also get amino acids from what we eat and from supplementation. And amino acids play such a massive role in thought building, but also in actually looking after our physical body. So I'm excited to have you share your expertise and knowledge on amino acids today and one of the best ways of getting them into our body. So thank you and welcome.
Dr. Leaf, thanks for having me. It's an honor.
Well, you have a great backstory, and I love to start with stories because I believe that really helps people understand why you have a passion for amino acids. So you have a backstory that got you passionate about amino acids. So if you could share your backstory, that'll be fantastic.
Sure. Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief. It's tough when it's who you are, right?
Well, that's it, but go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was raised in a family that was very devoted to health. My parents were actually in the supplement business, and then they had a natural health food store, a natural health food restaurant. And I was raised in a way where we thought a lot about food, the quality of the food. We were eating organic, I think, way before it was cool or hip.
Even a thing.
Yeah, even a thing. And so, yeah, it was just it was part of who I was. My parents were also athletes. My mom was a very dedicated master swimmer. And so at a very young age, I was going to the gym with them a lot. And I was also thinking a lot about what we ate. We also happened to be pescatarians. So we ate mostly plant-based, but we ate some fish. And because of that, my parents being very serious about nutrition, they thought a lot about combining different types of plant sources together to make sure that we got complete proteins and that we were eating well. So that was really kind of like the foundation. I think even at the earliest age, my parents exposed me to amino acids, and it's one of the first supplements I actually remember my mom talking to me about. It must have been like 3 or 4, and I remember her being like, "Here, Angie," like before and after we would go to the gym, and her just telling me like, "Can't you feel it?" And I actually really could feel it. I remember it's one of those foods or supplements that when you consume it, you actually can feel it because it impacts your energy, it impacts your mood, it impacts your muscles, it impacts so much of your life. Not like you feel it like you might feel caffeine, but in a much more nuanced way.
Yeah.
And so I was just exposed to that very early on. That said, I think like many people, you might get exposed to a set of ideas and beliefs and kind of a cultural view even, and you don't know you don't know how much that impacts the way you think. Later in adolescence, I started to explore a lot more on my own, and both my parents maintained careers as entrepreneurs, small business people. So I definitely came from a family of more kind of vibrant mania, like explore everything on your own, learn everything through your own lessons, less kind of a conservative, do what you're told, follow these rules. And so I got myself into a lot of trouble. When I was 16, I had a very bad LSD trip. And I was in the wrong neighborhood. I'm not a violent person at all, but because I was acting crazy, I provoked some other people who were much more, I guess, hardcore than me. And they stabbed me multiple times and then nearly beat me to death. And so there was obviously a lot of psychological, mental recovery that came out of that, as well as physical recovery. And it was really the beginning of my life at 16 of owning my own health, of it not being about, what my parents taught me or what my parents believed, but really like, what is the right nutrition for me? What is the right exercise for me? What's the right spiritual practices for me? Is meditation for me? What about yoga, breath work? All these things that kind of my hippy dippy parents had exposed me to, but I think I just took for granted and didn't understand. And so that's when I really started to think a lot more about overall mental, emotional, psychological health. And I think, it was just the beginning of my own personal health journey. And, not to go too much into trauma, but I think it's informed so much of my life, actually.
You're welcome to go into the trauma. This is the Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess podcast, and trauma is what we need to be talking about because there's all different levels on a continuum, and they do influence our outcome. And a lot of your business expertise and what you've done with the rest of your life, I think, is very informed by that. So you're welcome. If you feel like you want to explore that more, you're welcome to.
Thank you. I think it's definitely influenced who I am and my business career, my family life, everything. Because I think when I'm getting exposed to something that is so challenging, so dark, so provocative, it either kind of invites one to try to resolve those things. and make new connections and embrace it and create meaning out of it, or to shut down, in the face of it. And I was really lucky. I'm super lucky to be resourced through talk therapy, through acupuncture, through yoga, through breath work, and through nutrition to help heal myself. Again, though, a few years later, I was through that journey. I became very interested in yoga at a young age and service work. And I was doing service work in India, and then I was doing advanced yoga study at an ashram in northern India at 21. And I was involved in another traumatic event. I was in a bus accident in the foothills of the Himalayas, and the other bus went off the cliff, and there's basically no emergency services there. And so I was one of the few able-bodied people that could, climb down hundreds of meters of a cliff to try to rescue the few survivors out of, I think, 31 people, 26 people died. And again, that was just an experience for me. While it wasn't like almost a trauma that I provoked in the previous experience, right? Like I kind of sought out this really intense experience and got myself in too deep. In this way, I was trying to serve, I was trying to do yoga, and yet still I, kind of found myself in a situation that was very troubling and hard. And coming out of that, it's interesting, I think the first few years after that, I actually didn't go deeper into my own personal health journey. I went more into trying to be successful. I actually don't think I healed as much around that. And I really suddenly came back from that. I finished college and I just wanted to be like an international businessman. And so I moved to France for a few years. I ended up moving back to India. And after years of kind of grinding and trying to be successful and make something of myself, I moved to Boulder and I got back into health. And I ran a behavioral healthcare company for a few years that specialized in working with young adults who had been struggling with substance abuse or other types of kind of addictive behaviors, oftentimes with lots of trauma. So it was really, I felt connected to that type of group of people. And then, it's interesting, after years of that and working in that line of business, I somehow kind of came back to my roots, and I really wanted to start a new business. I wanted to do something that I was passionate about. I wanted to do something that I believe deeply in. And I joke about it, but I think it's maybe could be most understood in this kind of context with someone like yourself. I basically started the company that like little 3-year-old Angelo's mom would be most proud of.
I could hear that coming as you were talking. I could hear that coming, Angelo. I want to ask you a quick question. Just relating back to the years of work that you did and the initial trauma and getting into the LSD, are you comfortable just sharing, even if it's very bird's eye view, Cliff Notes version of, what was the trauma that sort of launched you into? Did you ever identify the sort of source, the origin of what got you caught up in that world as a 15-year-old? And, then after that was a journey. And obviously there was the trauma was of the accident, but the initial trauma that you said you almost spent years trying to deal with.
I'm more than happy to share about it. If I understand your question correctly, you're asking less about, what was the trauma that came out of being stabbed in the LSD trip, but more what was the trauma that maybe provoked me to play out in the realms of that. I think it's such a good question, so deep, and I have not had that question before in context interviewing around, amino acids.
I've got a point. I've got a point that I'm going to make. So once I've got your story, then I can.
No, I think it's very deep and thoughtful. A few years ago, I've done therapy many times throughout my life. A few years ago, I engaged in a much deeper commitment to do psychoanalysis 3 times a week. And through that process, I initially started that process because I thought I had all this unresolved trauma from like getting stabbed and these very obvious traumas. And I was surprised to find, but it makes sense and I think relates back to your question, that there was a lot of trauma early on from my earliest years, more directly related to my relationship with my parents. And I'm very grateful for my parents. I'm very grateful for my life. And they are both very, I think I described earlier, there's a mania to it. There's an entrepreneurship kind of, they're very caring, thoughtful people. And I don't mean to expose them publicly like this.
No, not at all.
But there's a way in which they're quite absorbed in themselves and in their own experience. And I think at a very young age, I was required to get my own needs met. And to figure out how to cope and to figure out how to take care of myself and how to advocate for myself. And I just need to figure out everything on my own. And even in engaging with them, probably when I wanted more to be seen, to be validated, to try to have some kind of more secure attachment, they were not able to give that to me. They gave me other types of confusing signals. And so I think a lot of my childhood and adolescence was me trying to figure that out. And oftentimes maybe even pushing into those more extreme experiences because that's what I had modeled from my parents. But also I was just trying to figure it out on my own. I didn't have kind of a solid, secure boundary and sense of attachment.
So it's almost like, listen, we're not doing parent blaming here. Every parent was originally the child of someone. And you think of it like that. So we bring into I'm a parent of 4 children. You bring into your own parenting, but once you were a child, and your grandmother was your mother's mother. So your mother was a daughter. If you think of it like that, it's not a blame thing, but the mere fact is that each generation of parents, we are influencing our children. And what's healthy is you're not blaming them, as you said. You're not trying to take them, say that they were bad and messed you up, whatever. But it did mess you up. There was an impact. So you honor what they bring to the party, but there was an impact. So what you're talking about now, just to put you at ease, you're not running your parents down. They had a certain lifestyle that worked for them, came from their own whatever, but it impacted you. So you're not disregarding and dishonoring them. You are rightfully dealing with the impact. And the impact was that you maybe felt a little bit abandoned or felt a little bit that you weren't seen or something along those lines. So that built and wired into you. And here's my point. Does that sound, first of all, does that sound sort of potentially like I'm on?
Yeah. And I think everything you're saying makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so now here's my point in bringing it back. You're going to be interested to see how am I going to segue back to amino acids. Well, each experience that you had growing up as a child is being wired into your brain. And how does it get wired into your brain? We say that word wired into the brain, but essentially that experience was being processed by you, your mind, which is this quantum non-physical thing. And then your mind uses your brain to activate the brain, and the brain responds. How? The energy of the experience goes in the brain, and then the brain responds genetically and neurochemically. And on the genetic level, it makes amino acids. So you've wired in childhood experiences into the brain as amino acids that go into proteins, and the vibrations within the amino acids are holding the experience. So therefore, if the experience is slightly distorted, which you had some excellent experiences, but you had some distorted ones, and they were specifically around attachment and who you felt you were and what you needed, the deepness of who you were as a person kind of didn't get seen. So therefore, there's a couple of amino acid distortions there physically. Now, we always think of amino acids as a physical substance, and we think it's just through food. And that's why I started this podcast by saying amino acids are building things, including our experiences. So I know we're going to talk now about amino acids and how it works in our body, because it's really important, because the mind has got to use the brain and the body, and we want them as healthy as possible. And amino acids play a phenomenally massive role, but they also play a role in building our thoughts. And so those thoughts that happen in childhood are wired in, and then they influence our behaviors. And so you had to kind of heal on 2 levels. So as you did all your therapies and things, you were healing those amino acids, and then your body then followed suit, and you started dealing with the physical amino acids of your actual coming in from physical food and diet and stimulating through exercise, etc. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's a beautiful vision of how it all fits together. So thank you for sharing
Holistic.
that.
Okay, there we go. So now let's hand over to you to talk about amino acids, because you did a full circle back to your childhood roots. And as you said, your mom, was very impressed with this 3-year-old who's now this man running this company who you started in your garage, which is such a great story, as did Steve Jobs and quite a few people. You started from your garage, and you have a great successful company making amino acid supplements that I love, by the way, and I use them. And our whole family does the Kion supplements. They're amazing. But let's talk about amino acids. Let's talk about them. I've given a bit of the mind stuff. Let's talk about what they do physically in our body, because you're really good at that. Is that okay? Can we transition to that?
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah, so I'll just start at the most fundamental level. Amino acids are the building blocks of protein. So anytime we talk about protein, we're talking about amino acids. And in our bodies, there's 20 amino acids that build up the proteins in our body. And when I say proteins, I'm really talking more in this case about muscle. And there's different types of muscle. There's the muscle that's actually your skeletal muscle. There's soft muscle that encapsulates your organs, your gut. There's your cardiac muscle, et cetera. But that's made up of these 20 amino acids. There's actually many more than those that are floating around in your body, but 20 are like the core components of that. And the reason why these are so important and interesting is that they're very different than the other macronutrients. Oftentimes we talk a lot about carbohydrates, we talk a lot about fat, and the primary role of carbohydrates and fat when we eat them is to give us energy. You eat carbohydrates because literally they get converted into ATP, which is like your body's source of the actual fuel it burns, and similarly with fat. Protein can be converted into an energy source, but that's not its primary source. It's not its most ideal source or its ideal use in the body. When you eat protein, what your body wants to do is to break down that protein into the individual unique amino acids, put that amino acids into your blood, and then to fuel all of the protein amino acid requirements throughout your body. So you may be asking, well, what are the protein amino acid requirements throughout your body? Over 50% of our solid body mass is made up of proteins and thus made up of amino acids. So that's things obvious like your heart, your kidneys, your liver, your muscles. But it's things like you said, our neurotransmitters are also amino acids, or their precursors are amino acids. So much of our body.
Neurons.
And
our
your
neurons.
Yeah. I mean, our brain, our experience of existing mentally is a protein experience. It's an amino acid based experience. And what many people don't realize is that the way that proteins function is that they're in a constant state of breaking down and then resynthesizing. And the reason for that is basically for them to function optimally. There's a certain half-life to every protein in our body, and it'll break down and then it'll rebuild itself again. So it breaks down into its component amino acids and then it rebuilds. Not the whole liver at once, but portions of it, right? Not the whole heart at once, but portions of it. Yeah.
Little by little without you even knowing it's happening.
Exactly. And when it breaks down into some of those component amino acids, it can't reuse some of them. About 20%. It's different throughout the body, depending on the organ, depending on the muscle, depending on how old that tissue is. But some portion of it can't be reused. And the portion that can't be reused gets converted into urea and you pee it out. It's really that simple. So you have to replenish those amino acids. Your liver has to be rebuilt. Your heart has to be rebuilt. Your brain can't, your neurons can't just stop functioning, right? They need new amino acids. So when you eat protein and when you eat amino acids, you're not just giving your body energy for it to burn, to run itself. You're literally you're giving your body the core bricks, the building blocks that make up your brain, that make up your heart, that make up all your muscles. So it's like that's how...
And make your thoughts.
And make your thoughts, yes. And so if you deprive yourself of that, then naturally your whole body, all these different parts of your body are going to suffer. Luckily, though, our body has built a way to help protect these core functions of our body, and that is muscle. So many people think muscle, the skeletal muscle, its primary role is to move. That is a big part of skeletal muscle. If you don't have, biceps or you don't have leg muscles, you wouldn't be able to walk, you wouldn't be able to lift things. It is what helps you do that. It is also the reservoir of amino acids for the rest of your body. So if you stop consuming amino acids or protein, and you only eat sugars, for example, or only eat fats, your liver has to rebuild itself when it breaks down some of its existing proteins. So where is it going to get those amino acids from? The body communicates to your skeletal muscle to start breaking itself down to put amino acids into the blood so that your organs can function. And that is 100% true for your brain as well. So if you don't eat enough protein or amino acids, or you go through some type of state that's highly stressful, you'll start to break down your muscle tissue to fuel your brain, to fuel all your other organs. So hopefully that gives kind of its initial overview, but it just shows how important amino acids are for the core functioning of your body, and why they're, as the building blocks of protein, so different than the other macronutrients, and really so different than other micronutrients.
Excellent. I loved how you explained that. I think it was brilliant. There's a doctor that I work with that we're going to be doing some research with, and the proteome, which, as you know, is the protein, we talk about the protein being the protein collectively in the cell, is the quickest to respond to, it's like the first thing that responds before all the other things happen. So, we've got telomeres, we've got all kinds of things, as you know, in our body, but the very first thing that responds to what we are putting into our body, whether it's our brain and body, whether it's our thoughts from experiences, or whether it is food substances or alcohol or liquid, whatever, stuff, is the proteome responds first and then everything else follows after that. And it's the quickest to respond to also to our emotions, which is also why I asked that question in the beginning. So I just wanted to throw that in there. So this, I'm really undergirding the importance of understanding how to look after ourselves right from the sort of first base kind of thing. So that's so interesting. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about, there's so many things like muscle's important for aging well. It's important for body composition. It's important for reaching the ideal body composition that's best for you. And I mean, there's so many things that you talk about. How would you like to handle that side? There's so many things you can share with us.
Yeah, I mean, I think just really maybe tackling them one by one.
Okay, let's start with body composition.
But at a foundational level, we can describe, why it does that. Why is it that muscle and amino acids support all of these things? So at its most foundational level, muscle let's take longevity first. Maybe that's the easiest one to start with. And I think the one that
goes with the proteome and things as well, which is
it's a great segue from what you just talked about.
Big deal. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So as we age, there are many reasons why we'd want to have lean muscle. The one most obvious one that's very clear cut is to maintain activity levels. It's very clearly correlated to how long we'll live and the quality of our life. If we stay active, if we're able to walk still, if we're able to still exercise, if we're able to enjoy and play with our family, if we're able to lift things, then naturally our overall health stays elevated. But some of the things that people don't realize is, for example, if and when you have some type of injury, and this is not, I'm not saying when you're 80 or 90, this is like in your 50s and your 60s, even in your 40s. When you have some type of injury, your body will undergo a stress response. And your body becomes anabolically resistant, meaning it becomes harder for when you eat protein for you to build muscle from it, because your body wants to basically prioritize that instead as an energy source. And that's why when people get sick or they have some kind of energy, they tend to lose a lot of muscle mass. So the degree to which you maintain muscle up until some type of inevitable injury, all of us will experience some type of hard thing in our life, you really want to have that as an asset. It's almost like a savings account for when things don't go as we planned later in life. And that thus you have this asset you've built up that can support all of your organs to function well when you undergo, some type of injury or illness, et cetera. And thus you can get back to your normal activity levels sooner and be able to get back to who you were sooner. Other things people don't realize about muscle is that it is inversely related to insulin resistance and to blood sugar. So a 10% increase in lean muscle is related to an 11% decrease in insulin resistance. The reason for that being when you have more muscle, lots of times people just think, I need to try to not be overweight, right? Or I need to try to be leaner. But the muscle plays a very key role in storing the glucose that you consume and in regulating your insulin levels. So it's really, it's as important as not being, overweight from fat, et cetera, in older age, and really maintaining healthy metabolic health. So as you can see, there's so many reasons why maintaining muscle is important. Now, why, what do amino acids necessarily have to do with that? Well, this is another really curious point around how amino acids interact in our body. When we're in our 20s, for example, and I'll leave out childhood and adolescence because it's even different, because we have different types of hormones that regulate how we process amino acids. But a healthy 20-something-year-old, when they consume protein, about half of it is essential amino acids. And I'm saying like an animal protein. This would be like eggs, a whey protein, it could be a meat, et cetera. Well, actually a little bit less. It's about 40 to 45%. And that 40 to 45% is the active component of the protein. So earlier I said there's 20 amino acids. It's really these 9 essential amino acids that stimulate the muscle protein synthesis, stimulate whole body protein synthesis. They complete that process and they utilize some of the other amino acids to actually build the proteins. But without those 9, you don't get the new muscle being built or the new proteins being built in the body. So when you consume, when you consume a gram of whole protein, only less than half of it is really contributing to that process.
To the important 9.
To the important 9, yeah. If you consume a free-form amino acid supplement, that only contains the 9 essential amino acids, as a young 20-year-old without any type of exercise, it's 2 times as powerful as the protein for protein synthesis. If you consume it before exercise, it's 3 times as impactful. And that's because you don't have to digest it. It immediately goes into your blood and immediately becomes accessible to your muscles and to the rebuilding of proteins. As you age, though, starting at age 40, which is when sarcopenia, or kind of the loss of muscle mass, begins, you start to not only have a harder time digesting the proteins and turning them into and getting the component amino acids out of them, but you're also less sensitive to new protein synthesis. And this is even more true for perimenopausal and postmenopausal women. And that's because I don't know enough of all the science, honestly, of women's health to speak to the exact hormonal changes and why that happens. But from the outcome studies, it's very clear that when they consume a whole food protein, perimenopausal or postmenopausal, that they get less muscle protein synthesis and less whole body protein synthesis out of it than a man of, say, the same age would.
Okay.
And so how do you overcome that? With essential amino acids, with free form, in that case, they're immediately available within the blood. You don't have to go through digesting them, and you can formulate them just right to where they basically do a better job of stimulating protein synthesis. And thus, at 40, they become about 3 times as effective as protein. And as every decade after that, you can add another multiple. So by the time you're 50, it's about 4. 50, it's 4 times. 60, it's 5 times. It continues to increase how much more potent a free-form essential amino acid can be.
Sorry to interrupt you there. Just to confirm that people got that. So just repeat that.
Yeah. So as you age, your ability to digest protein and your sensitivity for the essential amino acids within the protein to stimulate protein synthesis in your body becomes reduced. And thus, the impact of taking a free-form essential amino acid supplement, there's many out there, obviously. I mean, I have a company that does this, but there are many that do this. Taking one of those in the proportions, assuming it has all 9 essential amino acids and it has a formula, I can describe more with this formula, an ideal formula, it will stimulate muscle protein synthesis at multiples many greater than the protein itself. At age 40, it's about 3 times effective. Age 50, it's about 4 times effective. Age 60, it's about 5 times as effective.
Amazing. So as you're getting
protein
older,
synthesis. Yes.
Right. So the
as
free
you get
form,
older,
the free form is going to make it so it's almost it's dropping off. But if you take a free form, you're getting massive benefit as you're getting older. You're getting more and more.
And really, it's not so much that the essential amino acids are getting better. It's that your ability to utilize the protein and your sensitivity to more standard amounts of those essential amino acids in regular foods the human body is not as good at using it. So thus, a free-form essential amino acid supplement becomes that much more impactful. And again, we can get into the proportions. It's not anyone. You really need ideal proportions to stimulate this kind of protein synthesis.
So this is excellent. So this is why, we all know that as we're aging, things change and the hormones change and everything like that, as you mentioned. And this is where things like bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, same sort of principle as you're not going to replace it, but your body's going to utilize what you give in different versions more effectively. So that's really important. It means we don't just have to lose muscle and get to the point where we get weaker and weaker and not have that store because it's so important. So that's really great. That's really great to know. So in terms of I know people are asking, okay, you said how do you get this free form? And I know there's lots of companies out there, but you specifically spent years researching and developing a form of amino acid that people can, I use it. It tastes delicious and you can put it in, I mix it with my electrolytes and that's what I use when I'm saunaing, going around during the day, doing my workout, whatever. I use it all the time.
That's a great way of using it. That's a really smart way of using it, making sure you're getting both those core electrolytes and amino acids at the same time. And many people don't realize that amino acids themselves have a hydrating function as well. They improve the osmolality of the beverage and thus help to pass more water into the small intestine. So it's actually great for hydration as well.
Yeah, I feel that like if I've had a really intense workout in sauna and I've sweated a lot, I found that just the electrolytes, water alone did well, but water plus electrolytes did better. Water plus electrolytes plus your amino acids, it's phenomenal. I can really feel that difference in terms of, and also just as a personal story, I had an emergency appendectomy last year and it totally messed up my body. I had to go for a couple of repair surgeries after that. So I had to have like 3 surgeries in a short period of time. And I couldn't do my normal exercise routine or anything. And so I knew that all of my amino acids physically were suffering, and I had a good store, so that helped. But certainly in that time of recovery post-surgery, I found it extremely helpful to take the amino acids along with the electrolytes. So that's just my own personal story.
I love that story, and I'm so happy to hear that they served you in that way. And I want to get to the proportions, but it's too good. Yeah. It's too good to pass up. The studies that were done with the formula that we use is actually specifically for NASA for situations like you described. So because astronauts naturally can't undergo resistance training in space, or there's very little resistance, right? They're just floating around without gravity. Yeah. There's a natural loss of muscle mass because to build muscle, you need a stimulus. You need like lifting weights, or I'll get to it in a second. You need some other type of stimulus, and then you need the fuel. You need the amino acids to help rebuild the muscle. Well, what researchers wanted to uncover, and thus NASA sponsored the study, was, is there any way that astronauts could maintain muscle mass over an extended period without any resistance training? So they conducted a study. They had the participants in complete bed rest for 28 days, no movement outside the bed. But they were given 3 servings, basically the equivalent of 3 servings of Kion Aminos, 6 times a day for 28 days. And at the end of 28 days, they had net muscle gain. Very small muscle gain. But they did not waste away. They did not lose all their muscle. They lost muscle strength and power, like naturally, if you're not training the muscle, but they did not lose mass. And the reason for that is that when you consume, again, free-form amino acids, and in this type of proportion, which I'll get to in a second, it not only is a fuel for rebuilding the muscle, it is a stimulus. It actually communicates to the body to break down some of the older proteins and rebuild new ones and to build back better. So it actually,
wonderful. That's amazing.
It's incredible if you're in a situation in which you need to be you have bed rest basically mandated from surgery or from something else to maintain some of your, physical prowess while you're in bed.
You feel that strength, because I'm used to working out every day and walking and going running on the beach with my dogs, and I couldn't do anything for almost the whole month of December. And but I still had the strength. When I could do it again, it was almost like 24 hours and I was back up and almost the same level of strength as I had before. And so that really did help. It helped quickly, I should say.
Yeah, it's incredible that this is possible. So in terms of the formula and the proportions and why all that, so we didn't do anything super secret or really proprietary. What we did is we hired the best researchers to help us do a meta-analysis of all of the amino acid research over the last 40 years. We worked with people that were directly part of, for example, that NASA study, consulted with really the experts in the field and said, what works best? And we poured through all the research and all the literature. And luckily, essential amino acids, while they're not kind of like the sexiest new product, they're not this thing that's like, the most, they've actually been around a while. That also creates a lot of research. There's hundreds of papers, and papers sponsored by NASA, the NIH. There's so many different reputable organizations. And the consolidation of that research shows that the ideal formula must include all 9 essential amino acids. So if you start looking for aminos and you find BCAAs, branched chain amino acids, that's only 3 of them. Don't waste your time on a product that only includes the 3. It's a waste of time and money. There's a great meta-analysis study I can share with you and your audience if they're interested, but it's just totally not worth your money. So you must have all 9. And also, if you find a brand that's only giving you 8 and they say, this other one's semi-conditional, it's not true. You need all 9 essential amino acids. Okay. The research shows it. This is, widely accepted by the leading academics and researchers. And then when you have those 9, the way that you come up with the ideal formula is you start with the proportions of the amino acids as they exist in human skeletal muscle. So if I sampled my bicep muscle, what would be the proportions of those amino acids? Then you increase the leucine. I'm getting a little technical here, but you'll see this is what's on our label. And if you wanted to compare any other products, this is what you want to look for. The leucine, in the end, you actually need it to be about 40% of the final formula, because it plays the key role in stimulating the process and in fulfilling the process of protein synthesis.
So it's like without that, it's like the enzyme.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And then you also need to maintain the relationship of valine and isoleucine to the leucine. So those are the 3 branched chain amino acids. That's why they're famous. You may see products just with them, but I promise you, don't waste your time and money on only the 3.
You need the
all 9.
combination. You need all 9, and you need that combination of the branched chain amino acids with it to make it work.
Yeah. So then you need to increase the 2 other branch chain, the valine and the isoleucine, to maintain their proportions to the original human skeletal muscle, which was changed when you increase the leucine.
Okay. So you got to increase that. Okay.
And then you also need to increase the lysine. And that's because lysine is both a limiting factor for protein synthesis, and it's just actually slower to get into the muscle fibers. And so if you don't add enough of it, then it's too slow and it slows that process. And that final formula will look just like if you go to getkion.com and look at our Kion Aminos formula.
You've got the formula there.
That's it's transparent. There's nothing proprietary. That is the ideal formula based off of all of the best research over the last 40 years, consulting with the best experts. So it's very straightforward. So I would I would just look for that formula basically, and always look for a transparent formula, not people who are, hiding, like you can't tell what's in it, right? It's some mix of an amino acid blend. Like, just tell us what's exactly in it.
Exactly. So you're very transparent, as you say, so people can go. We'll put the link in the show notes. People can actually go to your website and they can see this exact combination of the what it should be, the exact formula and how it plays out. You have a full understanding. You have different. So just tell us specifically about Kion. You've got different flavors. It comes in a little container and you just scoop it out, and it's super easy to.
So there's 4 different flavors. They all use natural flavors, and we don't use any type of artificial sweeteners. And so they're delicious. There's watermelon, there's a lime, mixed berry, and mango. And mango is one I always thought I don't really like. I don't know if I like mango flavors. It's my favorite too.
That's my favorite.
Because it is so authentic and natural tasting. It tastes like this delicious mango flavor. And it's really simple. You just take a scoop of it, put it in 16 ounces of water. I like to make it ice cold. Like, I'll actually shake it with ice and drink it. And in doing that, kind of based off what I was saying earlier about your age and activity levels, you can just multiply that by however many times. If you're 50, multiply it by 4, and it's about that many grams of protein. It's that kind of equivalent that you just get in like that through a delicious,
That's amazing. One scoop and you're getting what your body needs. So it pretty much reads it's almost intelligent. It's reading what your body needs for your age, and it actually gives you what you need, which is amazing. If it's the right formula. It's not the right formula, that's not going to happen. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is fascinating. Well, we're going to put all those links in the show notes, and people can find you at your website. And where else can people find you and find out more about Kion?
Getkion.com is really, I think, the best place to go. I mean, we're on all the social channels, et cetera, but we try to share, have as much information, education, et cetera, everything there. That's
fantastic. And I think there's some sort of special as well for my listeners.
There is. We have a special deal just for your listeners.
It's just fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Angelo. It's been a great discussion. Thank you for going down the trauma road with me there and building the link between. I wanted people to understand amino acids we also build our thoughts into amino acids and into proteins, and our thoughts are vibrating. Our experiences are literally vibrating inside the amino acid that forms the protein branches that grows the neurons, dendrites, which hold the memories. So it's fascinating that it's there, and also that as we consume, our body's making the physical to create our physical body, so that link is so interesting. So it's not 2 different types of amino acid.
I love your approach, Dr. Leaf. I love getting to have this kind of conversation that bridges it all and has such a holistic picture. And it really also shows that.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, thank you. That's great. And your story was so great. And your trauma informed you to a point where you actually were able to see in your own life the changes and helping people, because your mind's got to work through your brain and your body. So it's a great way of making sure our brain and our body are healthy too. So it's mind, brain, body connection all the way around. Well, thank you so much. It's been fascinating. Thank you for your really great explanations of product and of amino acids and how they work in our body. And I think everyone's enjoyed this. I have certainly enjoyed it. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Leaf. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.